And welcome to our February 23rd, 2026 council meeting. I'd look for a mover and a seconder to call our meeting to order at 6:15 p.m. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. We have a recommendation to go into a closed meeting in accordance with Section 239(2)K of the Municipal Act, and this is to consider the following: Prime Minister's Path Property Conveyance, Section 239(2)K, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. May I have a mover for this? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? That carries unanimously, and we will reconvene and open at roughly 7 p.m. Good evening to everyone who's joined us now. I will look for a mover and a seconder to reconvene in open at 7:10 p.m. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. We've gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community. We have some additions to the agenda, including 2 delegates, one just registered before the meeting started, and we will call on them at the appropriate time. And we also have an additional correspondence that has been added as well. So I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder to the agenda as adopted. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favour, and that carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest, councillors? Seeing none. We do have, coming out of closed, our recommendation is that from the closed meeting, council reconvenes and that the council receives for information the report CAO-2026-04, Prime Minister's Path Property Conveyance, and that council provide direction to staff. Can I have a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. On to our previous minutes. We have January 27th regular council, January 29th special council, February 2nd committee of the whole, and February 9th special council, all to be adopted as presented. May I have a mover? Okay, we're going to move and second it first, and then we will go for question and comment. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. Councillor Wilkinson, you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. So 2 meeting minutes in particular, January 26th, no issue, but January 29th, I wanted to bring up, as well as February 9th. So, first and foremost, reviewing January 29th, I did receive correspondence from my constituent in particular who had delegated that evening, but there was a document submitted as correspondence that was misplaced, or I guess it was posted on the agenda, but it was intended to be correspondence. And additionally, the delegate did provide an email with a presentation that he was looking to have added as an attachment. So the minutes, I'm looking to have that, I guess, amended, or even the information at least posted as per the official record, so that that information is there, because right now half of it is missing. So looking to have those as per standard practice for us. Is there any questions on that, or?
Just let me confer with the clerk.
Yep, and I can provide the data if needed.
So it would just be that it would need to be an amendment. That's all. So it's fine for you to move that, and then if that's council's desire, that can be updated in the minutes, is what the clerk is suggesting. So you're moving that. Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Any other comments or questions on that change? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, I'm not clear what document we're adding to the minutes.
I would go back to Councillor Wilkinson on that.
So through the chair, perhaps we should do this, is that the delegate, there was correspondence and delegation from a constituent who came that evening. The correspondence was added as an attachment for the delegation. It should have been under correspondence, and there was a presentation provided which was intended to be attached as part of a delegation presentation, looking to just basically make sure it's on public record and clarified. What I suppose I'd be willing to do is, given that you haven't seen it, and that's a fair point, why don't we look to move or refer the January 29th minutes to a future meeting, and I can provide the data to the clerk to have it updated.
So that's fine. A referral to, we just need time and place. So would it be the next council meeting, end of March? Whatever date that is. March 23rd? 5th? March 25th.
Is that enough time, or could you get it done sooner?
Well, we only vote on them during council meetings, not committee of the whole.
Right, so the next council meeting then makes sense.
So I'm just clarifying with you that that's the time and place that you're okay with? Okay, so that's been moved. Is there a seconder for that referral? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And you said you had a note about another set of minutes?
Through the chair, discussing February 9th. So I have a couple notes here. I think in general, just reading through it, there was on page 5, item 8, under amendments to mayor's budget, there was, second, it just said the Director of Financial Services, Treasurer H. Graywall, provided council with an update on the township's debt capacity. I do think that there was some important information there that should be part of the public record, including the total debt for 2026 is about 15 million, is I believe what I overheard, and that through 2026 the township will have repaid about 2.5 million, and then additionally, or the 2026 addition of 4.8 million in debt servicing will increase the debt servicing cost from about 6.11% from 2025 to 9% in 2026, and then finally the increase to 9% still keeps us below the 25% provincial threshold. So I've had a couple conversations about this with other folks, and I've reviewed it myself, and I think that those are probably relevant points to put in there under that item, as opposed to just the general. So I would move that that be added.
Okay, so moving to add that specificity, and seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any other questions or comments on that? On this particular item. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I just would look to through you, Mayor, that Director Grewal give the exact figures he gave that night, because I was thinking the same thing. Boy, I wish I would have those figures. So if rather than what we're trying to recite as compared to what the actual figures that you presented.
So I'm actually just going to jump in because the minutes are actually recordings of what, or representation of what occurred, that can be taken from the transcript. It is all transcribed, so it will be those exact numbers that were given to council. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I suppose that this would need to be referred as well to the end of the month, to the end of March.
So that one, because it is just having the additional detail that was already presented to council in that meeting, it can just be taken and then adopted with those changes, and those changes will be made appropriately. If you would like to see that written before you approve it, though, then yes, you can ask for it to be referred. So you're moving to also refer the February 9th notes to the March meeting.
Yes, and given
with the updated information.
And through the chair, given that we are talking about just pulling from the transcript to add the conversation, I can submit to the clerk some of the pieces I'd like to be listed there, and then have it come back on March, what'd you say, 28th?
25th, I think.
Excuse me, yeah.
Or 24th.
23rd.
I can't.
March 23rd. If you could, I'll provide the documentation. If we can have that referred back to come to us on March 23rd, that would be great.
Very good. You've moved that. I just realized I'm looking at an outdated calendar, and that's why my dates aren't lining up. Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Cressman. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries unanimously. So we do then have the February 27th minutes and the February 2nd minutes that nobody has made note on, if I'm reading that correctly, which was from our regular council meeting and our committee of the whole meeting. That has already been moved and seconded, so we're just voting on those two unless anybody has other comments on those minutes. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries unanimously. Onto our presentations. Our first one for the evening is the Petersburg Drain meeting, and this is to consider the engineer's report and presentation by the engineer. So an engineer report regarding the construction drain is to be considered, and I will now invite up Joel Miller of K-Smart Associates Limited to present this engineering report. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Mayor Salonen and members of council and staff. Thank you for this opportunity to provide as quickly as possible an overview of the key pieces related to the report that I wrote under the Drainage Act for the Petersburg Drain. So if we just go to the next slide real quickly, I'm just going to hit a number of the high points that I think are important, and then after that we'll take questions. Report authorization and background, summary of all the consultation that happened, what our recommendations are, costs, a very brief reference to assessments, and then time for discussion at the end. I think what I'll just briefly mention at this stage is that assessments are a topic that's not the primary objective of this venue. The primary objective of our time together tonight would be to review what the original impetus was for the report, compare it to what the report says, and ask, has this engineer barked up the correct tree? Is the problem that was set forth, is there a solution provided? Discussion and extended debate about assessments are saved for a separate venue called the Court of Revision, and that would occur at a later time. So let's go to the next slide. So the original impetus for there were two sort of concurrent factors that led to council appointing K-Smart Associates to prepare a report. In March of 2019, the Region of Waterloo signed a petition as a road authority to obtain legal outlets for a number of their storm drains that run across private land. They wanted to rectify some of the situations that were arising from that. And then secondly, there was in April 2019 a report of the Drainage Superintendent to Council speaking about the existing Petersburg drain and a handful of improvements that needed to be made. And so then those two sort of triggering factors were combined in an appointment of K-Smart Associates by Council to address the Section 4 petition from the region and a handful of improvements as well, all under a single report. Next slide. So just real quick, work in the Petersburg area under the Drainage Act is nothing new. There's been a series of reports over the years. 1944 would have been the first one for the downstream portion that's kind of highlighted in green. For a system known as the Harry Knipfel drain. Then in 1961, there was a very small segment of upstream drainage improvements built through a pipe drain. And then in 1983, there was a substantial report prepared on the Petersburg drain that did improvements from the top end near the railroad all the way down along the golf course, ending just upstream of the Notre Dame cloverleaf. So it's been about 40 plus years since we've had another report under the Act. So this is the way land use changes, needs change, and so the system evolves as it needs to. Go to the next slide. So just at a high level, this is a map showing the catchment area for the Petersburg drain. You can see Highway 7 and 8 there, running east-west. The overall size of this thing is just over 2,000 acres. There's 205 parcels represented, so there's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of landowners that are affected by this system. The main drain is the trunk of the drain, and that's over 3 kilometers long. Then there are 2 new branches proposed under this report, something called Branch B and something called Branch B1. Not very creative, but those would be the designations for the new works that we're proposing to address the region's petition. So if we go to the next slide, just a quick summary of the consultations that happened. So under the Drainage Act, there's a requirement right at the outset of a project to actually meet on site with landowners and hear what their concerns are, hear what their objectives are, and for the engineer to see the conditions on the ground and move forward from there in terms of investigation. So since there were a couple of different concurrent triggering reasons to start the report, we subdivided those initial meetings into a couple of different locations around town based on where the work needed to be done. So we had one in June, we had one in October of 2019. And then after we'd done our initial survey work, we realized there was need for a follow-up meeting with a number of the landowners downstream of the Notre Dame cloverleaf on the old 1944 Harry Knipfel drain. So that was our third site meeting. And then in August of 2024, there was an all-watershed meeting. So notices were sent to every landowner in the watershed, as well as affected agencies, so that there could be a presentation of the preliminary recommendations, preliminary assessments, and just provide an opportunity for landowner input. And that was very well attended at the St. Agatha Community Center. So in addition to these formal site meetings where notices were mailed, then there would have been many subsequent one-on-one conversations on site around town with different landowners as we work through the design. So if we go to the next slide real quick, this just talks about the first site meeting we had in June of 2019, what some of the issues were that were raised. The old 1961 pipe had some failures on it and was no longer necessary due to some storm sewer improvements that the region had done. One of the key triggering reasons for this project was that a ditch enclosure is requested by a business at 1611 Snyder's Road East to have the open ditch that bisects this property put into pipes so that there can be more beneficial use made of that commercial property. And so that was one of the improvements requested. And then we also spent some time talking about the impacts on downstream farmland due to upstream runoff that has changed over the years. We go to the next slide. This just illustrates the same farm property on the downstream side of Notre Dame Road in the year 2000, before some of the development on the east side of Notre Dame happened, compared to present, more recent aerial photography showing areas of the property that have received kind of ongoing surface runoff no longer being as usable for farming purposes. So we'll go to the next slide. So that was the first on-site meeting. The second on-site meeting, this is a map running sort of left to right would be Notre Dame Drive. Running sort of top to bottom on this map would be Snyder's Road East. This illustrates the region's storm sewer service area for the project that they did in 2017. And the little red arrows represent places where they were dumping water onto downstream private lands. So that was, as I mentioned earlier, sort of the impetus for their petition under the Drainage Act to get legal outlet. The arrow at the bottom of that little map, you wouldn't know, but it does discharge to the existing Petersburg drain ditch. So if we go to the next slide, this does sort of illustrate, again, a number of the locations around town where water was coming off of roadways and just discharging onto downstream private lands and causing some difficulty. So the region signed a petition so they could get a system that would convey their water safely to a legal outlet. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So as part of the investigation that we did for Branch B, what we show here are places along the route of the flow path from the Snyder's Road East storm sewers that dump onto downstream private lands. On the right-hand side, there are a couple of photos that just show some of the site conditions we observed when we were investigating after that meeting. There are a couple of average-sized people standing in that backyard next to some above-average size aquatic vegetation. This is a residential backyard. So we've got cattails and phragmites or whatever it may be that's rendered this backyard basically not usable. And then the picture below that is taken standing on Reinhardt Place looking downstream across the Reinhardt Place swim pond, which is probably a topic that we'll talk a little bit more about as the meeting goes along. All right, next slide. So then we had a third site meeting. This was later on during the design development process where we realized that there were improvements needed to clean out and upgrade some crossings on the 1944 ditch. So again, not surprising that there would need to be some work done on that part of the system to deepen it, to bring the culvert sizing up to standards. We also learned from landowners that a tributary branch, known as the 1944 branch drain, was okay as is. There was little felt need for any work to be done on that, and so there's nothing recommended in my report on that. In fact, based on discussions with landowners in the region, my report recommends that it be abandoned of status under the Drainage Act so that it doesn't become a piece of infrastructure that needs work in the future. All right, we're moving on to recommendations then. So the work recommended by the report is split into 3 categories based on the parts of the system that we're dealing with. The main drain is predominantly an open ditch system, about 2,000 kilometers or 2,000 meters worth of, that'd be a long drain, about 2,000 meters worth of ditch clean out needed, a couple of new field culvert crossings to be built, and then again, as I've discussed, a section just south of Snyder's Road, about 200 meters worth of that ditch that needs to be enclosed in pipes through this commercial property. And then odds and ends of surface drainage improvements further upstream where folks have flooding that they'd like to see improved, and the pipe drain built in 1983 is already there. So we can pretty readily make some minor changes to surface drainage and improve the drainage situation for landowners. So again, that's work on a recommended system, on an existing system, and then the 2 new pieces of the Petersburg drain are Branch B, arising from the Region's petition, and Branch B1, also arising from the Region's petition. So Branch B runs from the main drain ditch upstream across Notre Dame Drive through Reinhardt Place and all the way up to the outlet at Snyder's Road East. It's a combination of pipe drains and open ditches. At the bottom end, the pipe drain is 750 millimeters, so 30 inches in diameter. At the top end, it's 12 inches in diameter. And then Branch B1 just grabs some runoff from a region culvert, puts it in a pipe, an 18-inch pipe, and ties it into the Branch B system. So hopefully I'm not taking too much time with this overview. Let's just jump to the next slide. This gives an overview of the cost. That's all this information is basically in the report. This just puts it in sort of summary type format. So construction cost is just over $1.1 million. Allowances are a component of a project cost for any project undertaken through the Drainage Act, where landowners can be compensated for use of their land to build a new drain. So it's sort of like buying an easement, but it has different terminology. And also where the drain is built across private land and there's some damage that might be incurred, particularly on farmland where there's sort of lost productivity due to construction equipment creating compaction, leveling spoil, that kind of thing. There are allowances through the Drainage Act to recognize that there's a real cost to landowners for some of that work. So that's what that cost category is. The engineering work for the report phase is right around $231,000, and then construction phase is estimated at $128,000. And then there's various administrative costs, including the cost for temporary financing for the township to front the cost to carry the project invoices until it's completed. And so if there's interest charges that need to be rolled into the drain, those are eligible costs under the Drainage Act, and then it all adds up to about $1.6 million. And I'll just, like I said briefly, we'll go to the next slide. The way the assessments break down in terms of sort of major sort of cohorts of folks that are paying, if you will, township-owned lands and roads. The township assessment is not just based on parcels, but it would also be assessments to roads that the township owns within the watershed. Adds up to about $264,000. Of that, a sizable chunk relates to this Reinhardt Place swim pond that's received some discussion here recently. Then the region, as a petitioner, to obtain these legal outlets for their roads, they're on the hook for about 33% of the project. MTOs gaining a more functional outlet ditch for their drainage systems, so they have a certain share. The landowners that would like to see the ditching closed, their share is just over $400,000, and everyone else, all combined, chips in for $244,000. And of that 244,000, that would be all of those 205 parcels I mentioned at the very beginning that are represented in this watershed. It would be 204 or around 200 parcels or so that chip in for that dollar figure. So I think there's just one more slide. This is the end. These represent all the municipal drain watersheds in the Township of Wilmot. So the Petersburg drain sort of blob is sort of in the middle and a little bit to the right. So it represents a pretty sizable chunk of land within the watershed, and the township does have municipal drains all over, right? So this is where we are. I'd be happy to take questions if there are any at this stage.
Great, thank you very much, Joel. Just before questions, just so that everybody knows how this is going to proceed, Council, you can ask questions directly of Joel, then we will open it up to the public, as this is technically a public meeting. So if any of the landowners, you do need to be a landowner to speak on it, but landowners have comments on this, we will then call you up. And then after that, Council, I believe, has a motion to consider. So just so that everybody knows how we're proceeding on this. So with that, are there any questions for Joel at this time? Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. The 244,975, all other land owners, that would be the township or the land owners in the vicinity?
Can you go back to the slide that showed the 244? That would be all of the other private landowners. So that does not include township-owned properties.
Got you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I have essentially two comments, but if I can just respond back to Councillor Dunstall as well. In the report, there's a table that lists pretty much every property in that area and then what their perceived improvement would be, and that's how much essentially they're paying. Some are 100, some are 800, some are 1,000 or more. Yeah. Unfortunately, we deal with these drains in the rural wards, as I'm sure Councillor Cressman can appreciate. So getting back to a question, and I just want to more so clarify this so that everybody knows, but we're here tonight to discuss the report and the proposal of the design as opposed to the assessment. So the actual money and accounting side of it, I've done this before, but this is that's a quarter of revision conversation which comes down the road.
Absolutely.
It's fair. Okay. That was all I wanted to just sort of get out there. It's more of a comment. Thank you.
Any other questions for Joel at this point in terms of the engineering report? I do have a question on the report. I know that we've dealt with some drains as this council, but this is the first one I've ever seen that actually deals with a drainage pond. And considering that we're also the owners of it, I'm just curious, is that normal for a drain to go through a drainage pond? And are there other long-term impacts on our own infrastructure in terms of that pond?
That's a great question. So it is the case that stormwater ponds sometimes coexist under the Drainage Act as part of a municipal drain system, but more often than not, they're standalone. In this particular case, and would you mind going to the slide after my question slide? On this map, this shows branch B, and it illustrates how branch B is upstream of the pond, runs through the pond, and then continues downstream of the pond. My report recommended that the pond water level be lowered so that that upstream pipe system would work. So it is unusual, but it's not unheard of. And so the issue that I ran into as the engineer was that the pond in its current state, it needed maintenance for sure, and the outlet as it was designed wasn't low enough. And so there's a recommendation in my report to alter that. And in the report, what I've proposed is to more or less replicate the conditions that I found when I went and saw it and we surveyed it. It has a 15-inch pipe that leaves and a wetland permanent pool area that's about 1 foot deep. And so my report retained those features of it. Now the reality is, as I've had recent conversations more extended with township staff, that there are other aspects of that pond's design that are not things I observed when I encountered it. And township staff would like to see those features and functions brought into reality. And so that's kind of why this has received a fair bit of discussion in the last couple of weeks. Does that answer your question?
That does answer my question. Thank you. Councillor Cressman?
Through you, Mayor, further to that pond, is it a sediment that is built up that has altered the height of the pond, and as such, is that the reason why the levels aren't appropriate?
It's not so much sediment as, because when we did our survey of what the sediment is, we surveyed through the pond. The sediment is not causing problems for the proposed design. It's primarily the vegetation, and it's the design of the outlet pipes themselves. They control the water level, and those are too high. It desperately needs a clean out in any case. The forebay is full, right? So the sediment trap at the front end of the pond does need to be cleaned out. That's not the impediment, though. It's primarily the vegetation and the design of the outlet pipes.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, stop me if we're not at this point yet, but there is a memorandum that was issued in regards to the report on this. I'm wondering if now would be an appropriate time to maybe refer that over to Director Vanderwall for comment regarding the township's position on the stormwater management pond.
So yes, I just want to make sure we've asked all of our questions of Joel first, and then we can discuss that point to staff on the
Through the
memorandum.
chair, I suppose my opinion would be like, what if we were to hear from the township and that could potentially spark a conversation?
Sure, if that is what council would like to see, then I'm happy to do that, to indulge. I'm not seeing anyone objecting, so Director Vanderwall, would you like to speak to that?
Through the mayor. Yes, we are recommending that the engineer's report be referred back to the drainage engineer pursuant to Section 57 of the Drainage Act. The main reason for this is that we as the owner of the facility cannot sign off on the modifications to the proposed stormwater management appurtenances, particularly the stormwater management facility located on Branch B, as well as the ditches, which are all subject to our CLI ECA. We recognize K-Smart as drainage engineers. However, the drainage engineers were not selected per our purchase bylaw for the design and retrofit of the stormwater management facility. Per our CLI ECA, the design engineer shall certify that they are a licensed engineering practitioner who is licensed in Ontario, and the design stormwater management facility alteration and the facility has been documented in a design report and other applicable design forms. Also, that the stormwater management facility has been planned in accordance with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks publication Stormwater Management Planning and Design Guidance Manual 2003 as amended, and that it satisfies the design criteria set out in the Ministry's publication Design Criteria for Sanitary Sewers, Storm Sewers and Force Main for alteration authorization under the Environmental Compliance Approval. Further, as the owner, we must verify that the alterations will not result in adverse effects or deterioration of the approved quantity of downstream stormwater management facilities, and that we consent to the stormwater management facility alterations, and that the owner has consulted with the local conservation authority and obtained necessary clearance. So while we don't necessarily disagree that the stormwater management facility requires clean out and it requires a modification, we are unable at this point to sign off on the CLI ECA and would be looking for this to be removed from the stormwater management report and a RFP for an amendment to the stormwater management facility be done separately as per our purchasing bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. So Councillor Wilkinson, do you have a follow-up question to that at this point in time?
Through the chair, I suppose that would raise the question is how does that impact the design, and what would your essential response be to that? Because we're at odds.
Yeah, it impacts the design. There's no reason I can't address the petition from the region upstream of the swim pond until the swim pond is revised. I'm not in disagreement that whatever revisions happen at the swim pond need to be properly done, properly documented through a township-approved retrofit to the CLI ECA. And I've provided preliminary calculations to township staff showing what that would involve. We're really talking really minor from our initial review by the stormwater management engineer in our office. Very minor changes. We're talking an extra catch basin, we're talking a couple of pipes, but I can appreciate township staff's desire to see that in a formal engineering document. Again, as I mentioned, what my report did was I replicated what I found out there. Turns out what I found out there isn't what's supposed to be out there. And so I'm not opposed to seeing that retrofit be submitted to the township for approval, so the CLI ECA permit that they're obligated to maintain can be honored, right? And however, there's no what I've shown in red is I don't have enough depth if I just dump into the pond the way it is. So the other option would be I'd spend extra township money and run a pipe around the pond and dump into the ditch on the downstream side. So I just didn't think that was going to. That was why my analysis, I went for the cheapest approach for the township, which was to just drop the outlet pipe. If I don't do that, then I need to build a pipe around it, or I need to work with township staff and we revise the CLI ECA.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, is it safe to assume that if we're looking at bypassing the stormwater management pond, that, well, let's assume option A is fix the stormwater management pond,
Yeah.
get that remediated, run through there, versus option B is you run that additional pipe down and through. What costs more money?
It costs more money to run the pipe around the pond. The red option costs more money because the township has to pay to run the red pipe, and then the township still has to pay to clean the pond out.
Right.
So for a fairly nominal cost to retrofit the outlet, if I had to throw a construction dollar figure at it, I would say we're talking a catch basin and some 15-inch pipe and some 8-inch pipe, right? So well under 10 grand.
Director Vanderwall?
Unfortunately, with our review, the running around the pond still is a modification to the stormwater management facility as designed. So it still requires a modification to the CLI ECA and doesn't solve our essential problem, which is the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Parks requires us to make sure that the pond is designed appropriately. It takes the external drainage area. Admittedly, it does not need to, but that is still a redesign and a retrofit of the existing stormwater management facility.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes.
Excuse me.
Through you, Mayor. I guess this stormwater management pond is the question. As I understand it, they're designed for infiltration as well as a potential of overflow when extra rain or water comes through the system. I guess I'm a little bit confused here. Is it the infiltration that we're talking? When I think of my farm drains, I think about getting water off my farm fields as quickly as possible. I think when you think of stormwater management ponds in a subdivision, it's really trying to manage stormwater in an efficient way that you can get some to go back into the water table and then exit the surplus out of the system. So that being said, this isn't functioning properly because of, I'm just wondering, the design at the exiting of that pond, or there's still some debate, as I understand, of what has to be done to make it to operate effectively for both concerns, that it has infiltration and has the ability of outflow when there needs to be. Is that the kind of the layman's description of it?
I think that's, for the most part, a good description of what's going on. Ponds don't some ponds are designed as infiltration ponds. This one is actually not. It says in the swim report that it's not designed as an infiltration pond. Its primary function is twofold: to ensure that after the subdivision is built, the rate of peak flow that leaves the subdivision and goes downstream is no worse than it was before the subdivision. And then the other role for one of these ponds is to to collect all the new volume of water that runs off new driveways and new roofs and everything else, collect it like it's in a bathtub, and then feed it out a really small hose at the end. And so those are the two functions for the pond, and that's the intended purpose. And the fundamental issue with what's proposed for Branch B is that the water surface in the pond sits too high. So we just need to retain all those functions, retain all those purposes, but just drop that static water level so that the upstream lands can have a drain that has a chance to work without building the red option.
Okay. Any other questions for Joel at this point? We'll go to Councillor Martin first.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I must admit that I got a little lost in this because I wasn't aware Director Vanderwall's memo is new information for me, and Councillor Wilkinson's question. It seemed like you were aware of some things that I wasn't aware of, so I'm not sure, did I miss something? Is there something I didn't read, or was that not given to all of us?
It was given to all of council. I believe you all received it through email. I'm not positive the exact date. Oh, it is a part of the agenda, the amended agenda package as well.
Through the chair, if you click on 13.3, report on the meeting to consider, it's item number 3, corporate services memo.
Just while you're finding that, Councillor, and I think staff are going to come provide support. Councillor Cressman, you had a question or comment?
Yes, I guess I missed that one as well. I guess the question is, at this point, from the township's perspective, I guess through you, Mayor, to Director Vanderwall, we're waiting for sign off from MOE, Ministry of Environment, or design features from K-Smart, or where are we sitting in terms of this whole process?
Director, I'll let you answer, and then maybe I'd suggest we take a brief pause so that those councillors who didn't see the information can read it. Take a recess is what I'm trying to say, so that we're all aware of what's going on. But Director Vanderwall.
Through the mayor, sorry, I got a little bit distracted with the changes afterwards. So the question is whether or not we can proceed and whether or not we're waiting for the MECP for this. So the ECA is our new CLI ECA. We have the ability as the township to sign off on these requirements. The issue lies with the requirements have prescribed reporting, design that is beforehand. So we do not have any of that. We have discussed, and admittedly this came in recently with the drainage engineer. Initially we thought it was a clean out of the facility, in which case it would be bringing it back to the same ECA that we have, which is not a concern. Our issues with the CLI ECA lie with the changing of the facility, which requires a redesign and a retrofit, which requires the engineering report and everything for the stormwater management pond to demonstrate it before we are comfortable signing off on the CLI ECA for the pond, which we believe should come before signing off on the drainage report, because as was stated, the outlet invert needs the pond to be retrofitted and lower. I think I summarized that well.
Just could I have the acronyms in the long form? They just kind of zipped over my bald head.
Apologies, I do that often. The CLI is Consolidated Linear Infrastructure. ECA is Environmental Compliance Approval. MECP, Ministry of Environment, Climate, and Parks. I believe that's all of the acronyms.
Very good. So any other questions of Joel at this time on the engineer's report? Okay. Not seeing any. As I said, we still can open it up to, well, we will be opening it up to landowners for comments and questions on the engineering report, and then I'm fine with recessing if councillors want to be able to review the memo. I just want to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to see it. However, I think that the issue has been summarized quite well. No? Okay. All right. So I'm not seeing anyone needing to recess. So in that case, thank you very much, Joel, for joining us this evening. I will now ask if there are any assessed landowners with comments or questions on the engineer report. And just as a reminder that questions presented today are to be related to the technical aspects of the report, not the assessment. So anything to do with the costing, that would happen at the Court of Revision at a later to be determined time. So I would open it up. I know lots of you here are impacted landowners. Are there any questions or comments on the engineer's report at this time? Yes, please come forward and you can ask your questions. And if you can just provide your name for the record as well, please.
Hi, I'm Chad Curie. I live at 1243 Notre Dame Drive in Petersburg. Basically here, as I'm listed on this booklet that we've all received, it's so pretty. Is there somebody here that is able to clarify anything in here for me? Because I don't read plans. So getting a parcel like this in the mail, and everything's noted in here, obviously the address, the amount of money and everything like that. I know money's not on the docket today, but just there's things in here about catch basins on my yard being removed, some to be abandoned in place, where it's showing catch basins as of right now were moved 5 years ago to the other side of my yard by the township. It's not clear. It's not clear to me what's going on, and I would like to speak to somebody about it. So I'm here.
Absolutely. That is a great question. Glad you're seeking clarity. I would recommend offline, you'd be able to reach out to Director Vanderwall's staff, and they'd be happy to walk through with you what exactly it means on your property. And we can get you that contact information. Our staff can get that for you.
That would be wonderful.
To be able to do that. Great. Any other questions while you're here, Chad? Okay. Any other landowners with questions? Yes, please come on up.
Steve Bechtold. I live at 1826 Snyder's Road East, and I have a problem with the engineering report because myself and the landowner at 1836, if the way they got my water running, it's got to run uphill. And I don't think water runs uphill.
Same with mine.
My 20, well, I have more than that, but the 20-acre field I'm talking about runs into the adjoining field. There's about a 2-acre depression in the field. The water runs in there, it sits there, and it goes into the soil. The only way it can run the way they're saying it is now, it would have to go up about a 15 or 20-foot hill. I can't figure that out. The other reason they said it might run north towards the railway tracks, and I talked to the railway, and the water from where they say it should come out, which it never has in my lifetime, and I'm 70, that was my grandfather's land, my aunt's land, and for a while it was my land. It runs east towards Kitchener. So it doesn't run into the original subdivision of Petersburg. So either the engineer doesn't know how to read a topographical map, or we have got, like in down east, we got land that goes uphill. So my question is, how does that work?
So Steve, again for that one, I would suggest speaking with our staff online. If you can provide your contact details, and those questions about your property should be able to be answered for you. Thank you very much again for bringing that forward. Any other landowners with comments or questions on the engineer's report? Yes, please come forward. Thank you.
Jim Beringer, 1993 Snyder's Road. Three things real quick. First, to Councillor Wilkinson, a bit of clarity. You said in the assessment is those that benefit from this. It actually is those that contribute to it. There's only a handful that benefit from it, and I openly acknowledge that I contribute to it and I'm willing to pay. I just wanted to clarify that in drainage, it's not always benefit, you contribute. Can you handle that, Councillor?
Through the chair. You're not wrong. I think it's more so the term I was using. Ultimately, you're getting a net benefit as described in the report. But I agree, you're contributing, which is why you're paying. But the idea is that by contributing and then paying, you are receiving a net benefit. That's
okay.
But I understand. You're right, and I appreciate that you're willing and to essentially remedy what you contribute to the drain.
Okay.
But I agree. You ultimately contribute, but the purpose of the drain is ultimately to provide a drainage benefit to everybody that is essentially assessed, because you're all getting the terminology in the report would suggest that you're getting improved drainage, which is a net benefit to you.
Fair enough. I still
But
stand
I
by
agree.
what I said. Anyways, the second thing I want to say is I want to validate what the first speaker said. Several of us, our names are in that report multiple times. Would have a summary at the end ever done wonders? What do I owe? Like, do we total everything up every time we're in there? Or how does that work? Like a summary would have been so beneficial. And then my last question is, when's this going to happen? Like, nobody's talking about a date. I assume it has to be approved by council. Then how much, is it going to happen this summer or next summer? Or? Thank you.
Those are great questions, Jim. And I've taken note on the summary portion. In terms of timeline, it partly depends on what council does tonight. But what was suggested by the updated memo that staff provided is that the report goes back to the engineer for additional work and to be able to meet the requirements of on our stormwater management plan, as we've been discussing. So that will really kind of dictate how long that work takes to then come back to council and then approval. So I don't have a definitive answer on time. I'm not certain if staff would have a closer timeline. It kind of is in the hands of council tonight as to what decision is actually made in terms of proceeding next. But I think that's something council can also ask for, is for clear timelines to be provided to residents as this continues to unfold. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, while we're here, I'm wondering if, since the engineers that authored the report are present, they could answer some of the questions that have been raised this evening. So I wouldn't mind bringing up that Mr. Bechtold raised a concern about water, the way that it's essentially being collected or the way that it's being redirected. I wonder if the engineer would like to speak to that so we don't have to wait for or wonder about the answer.
It looks like Joel is willing to speak to some of those comments, so please come back, Joel.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to answer as many of the questions that have been raised so far as I can. Apologize, Chad, for the lack of clarity as it relates to your property. There's no additional work planned. Nothing. What's shown in the report represents what you've observed happen over the last few years. It's just documenting that. So that would be an answer to the first question. Steve asked a good question related to the way the land slopes. I do, from time to time, get accused of asking water to run uphill. I'll admit that. In this case, I did meet out on site with Steve and his neighbor to review their questions after the August 2024 public meeting. And there's a section in my report on page 13 where we went out and collected some additional points to demonstrate that the water from Steve's property that flows to the neighbors doesn't run into the railroad ditch and then out of the watershed. That was kind of the crux of the question at that time. There is, in reality, some of his land that flows to the neighbors, which flows into a depressional area in the field. So what I will say is that that water would run into a low area that I don't have my specific survey notes in front of me, but what the depth of that depressional area is, I'm not going to hazard a guess at this stage. The reality, though, is when we draw catchment boundaries, when we're doing hydrology, when we're doing Drainage Act watershed delineation, we look at the major topographical watershed divides. So there could be subtle nuances of little pockets of land that may not naturally overflow, but there's no reason why they wouldn't at some point in the future. Potentially someone may decide to tile that depressional area into the drainage watershed. And so that's why that land is assessed into the watershed in my report. And the depressional nature of those features is actually accounted for in the assessment calculations. So that's what I'll say about that. And I don't believe I need to say anything to follow up on Jim's comment, except for to check Schedule C, which will provide you with the bottom line dollar figure that you're assessed. Schedule C. Schedule C, as in cat. Schedule C would have the estimated net assessment, and it's listed in address order. So that's where people can read to see what they may owe. And I think that touches on all the questions that have been posed up till now.
Thank you very much, Joel. Are there any other questions from residents at this moment in time? Yes, please go for it.
My concern is with properties 1723, 1719, and 1717. When I put a laser level on my yard, you can find it on page 13 of 24, put a laser level on my yard, it hits the swale of the property on 85 Reinhardt. I'd just like that addressed because there's a catch basin at that point, which is going to obviously fill with grass and yard debris. If we could get this addressed, I was speaking with Joel throughout the day today. Yeah, if it's not addressed during the rain, we'll have like a lake in our backyards over those three properties.
And can you just leave your name and contact details with staff as well so that we can ensure that it's properly recorded what the concern is and get that addressed for you? All right. Any other resident questions at this point in time? Yes.
Hi, my name is Willie Hefner. I'm at 1135 Notre Dame Drive. I have the property where exiting the stormwater management pond, it runs through the front of my property. I'd like to clarify, is it proposed that that is covered in, that large ditch that's in my property, or is that staying the way it is?
I'm going to refer that to Joel, actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the ditch across your property, which is downstream of the stormwater management pond, is proposed to stay as a ditch the way it currently is. That is part of the outlet feature for the stormwater management pond. And there was one other question sort of posed related to timing and when is all this going to happen. It absolutely does depend on some of the decisions council makes. I also recognize this is a report that's been in process for many, many years. And so I would encourage whatever next steps are decided that we do so with a view towards expediting without taking shortcuts, if I can just say it that way.
Thank you, Joel. Willie, was that your only question that you had? Okay, very good. Any other questions from landowners at this time? Okay, I am not seeing any more. Did we have any online who seem to be? Nope. Okay. Any other questions of council at this moment in time? Councillor Martin, and then we'll go to Councillor Dunstall.
Through you, Mayor Salen, I'm just wondering, Director Vanderwall, if you have a timeline in mind, like if we would accept your recommendation that this go back to drainage engineer, do you have a timeline in mind?
Through the mayor, we have reached out to a couple design consultants on this one. The overall design is expected to take 4 to 6 months for a complete retrofit. We do have ability to redistribute some of the costs. I did not bring all that in the recommendation, but can have that for staff or for council if you would wish that.
Okay. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Director Vanderwall, I just want to make sure I understand your report, that this goes back to the engineering firm for 2 reasons. One is to make sure that it's classified properly because there's a difference governance issue, that it's not, doesn't fall under the Drainage Act, but it remains a municipal drain. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, I would say not completely. There is no issue, and stormwater management facilities are at times underneath a municipal drain. We are not looking at it staying under a municipal drain, but that can be addressed subsequently. The larger issue is based on the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Parks. We are required to make sure that a few processes are done for a retrofit of a stormwater management facility, and those have not been done. And the drainage engineer has stated that the pond needs to be lowered, and therefore it needs to be retrofitted. The drainage goes through it per the original design. Even going around the pond, therefore, is a retrofit of the existing stormwater management facility.
So it's just to make sure then that all of the environmental roadblocks or guardrails are kept in place. Would that be a fair summary?
Through the mayor, I would suggest the stormwater management facility is a well-designed facility to address the quality and quantity of stormwater runoff. We need to make sure that all of that is done appropriately as opposed to just a conveyance. I liken it to with your vehicle, if you were to remove the exhaust and the muffler, yes, everything will get through, but the exhaust and muffler have a purpose, so does the stormwater management facility.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to Director Vanderwall, I know I asked before the drainage engineer what would be the more cost-effective option, which is obviously to go through the stormwater management pond. He had estimated that some of the modifications might be $10,000 worth of construction or piping. What's the cost of the retrofit from your perspective?
Through the mayor, we have not reviewed the cost of a retrofit. This pond was designed in 2000, I believe. The updated stormwater management manual came out in 2003. We would be required to verify against that. I will note that the clean-out costs in the report also, we believe, may be higher because stormwater management, the sediment is to be tested, treated. I can't give a number to that till the design is there. I would not expect it to be overly significant, as I would see it primarily being a lowering of the existing facility, some minor regrading.
Councillor Wilkinson again.
Through the chair to Director Vanderwall, you spoke of the need for a design or an engineering assessment on the stormwater management pond. Is that something we can do in-house, or is that something that we have to outsource?
Through the mayor, we do not have the software to do it in-house. Admittedly, I have done these in the past. I do not have the timing to do it. I don't know that we have the expertise. I would be looking at getting a consultant through an RFP. I'm assuming that the assessment for the pond would be coming back to the township completely, so I'm looking at following then the purchasing bylaw for that and getting it outsourced.
Councillor Wilkinson again.
Through the chair, just a brief follow-up. Again, I don't want to put this up, but a rough idea of what that cost could potentially be? Ultimately, what I'm trying to determine here is it better to just throw the red pipe in? Or ultimately, I think what you suggested earlier is you have to, regardless, do the redesign and the assessment on this pond, regardless of what option is selected. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we're not causing floods or drainage issues for anyone that relies on this pond, I think, is the crux of it all.
Through the mayor, I do not believe the cost would be substantially different even if it were going through the Drainage Act, because I think K-Smart would agree that we want to do it properly. I do not believe that the cost would be significantly higher than what's in the facility, because primarily we are looking at removing sediment from the facility and then presumably lowering it and regrading it. Outlet control structure may change as well a bit. I would estimate if we are redoing the outlet control structure, we're probably looking at a $5,000, $10,000 in addition to what's in the engineering report for the sediment removal, and I don't remember that number.
Any other questions of council at this time? Okay, seeing none. Final call for any landowners or residents? Okay, not seeing any. With that, so councillors, there was the suggested motion that was presented in the agenda, but then I'm looking at the one following the memo. So that recommendation is that the engineer's report for the Petersburg Drain 2026 dated January 16, 2026 be referred back to the drain engineer pursuant to section 57 of the Drainage Act for consideration of the proposed works and assessment related to the Reinhardt Place Stormwater Management Pond Block and associated matters, which I think we've discussed at length this evening. And I think I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder, or possible wording changes. Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, just as a point of procedure, I believe we have to get 13.3 on the floor first and then provide an amendment to it.
Give me one moment. Okay. Sorry, you also have different numbering than I do on my notes. No, we don't, because it's not actually been moved. So there was a reason why I didn't get it moved and seconded, was so that we didn't have a motion until we had the discussion. So in that case, anything can be proposed. It can be the one that was originally with the agenda. It can be the one that I just read out, or it could be something that somebody else chooses if there's different wording that someone would like. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, based on our conversation in regards to item 13.3 under reports, I would move that we adopt our internal recommendation to have the engineer's report referred back.
Very good. So that would be the wording that I just read out. That's moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I don't know if we would ask Joel this question or Director Vanderwell. I'm just wondering what are the implications? It sounds like it could be a year from now then before this might be worked on. If we have this design that could take 4 to 6 months, and then I don't know what has to happen after that, so whether it could even be possible this year. Are there problems if we wait for another year on this project?
Director Vanderwell?
Through the mayor, we can have discussions with the drainage engineer on that. We don't have any dispute for all the other drain legs other than, what is it, drain B, I think it was. I would hazard a guess at this point that we are looking at a 2027 construction for it for budgeting purposes and finalizing the design, but until we dig into the details of it, I can't say better than that.
Okay. Joel, did you have a comment to add to that?
Yeah, to respond to your query related to timeline. The stormwater engineer from our office has indicated she can provide the design brief and the design needed to submit to the township for review in compliance with the ECA within 2 weeks. So I think referring the report back to me creates the window of time for there to gain consensus as to the updated design for Branch B. And then the report, once it's referred back, lies with the engineer to refile. So that's the timeline we're looking at.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor to refer back to the engineer. Were there any other comments or questions on this particular motion? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor. I think I'm hearing the consensus of the group is saying this has been going on for quite an extended period of time, and anything we can do to move it on quickly would be appreciated, even though it likely hits you in the pocketbook. I think at the end of the day, it represents problems for a number, and I think if we can address it in a timely fashion, I think that would be service to our constituents.
All right. I don't have an actual amendment, more so just kind of staff direction if possible. Seeing as it didn't seem like the paperwork was super easy to read. If you weren't an engineer, is it just possible that staff continue with communicating out as decisions are made to the impacted properties and continue to remain available to residents when they have questions? If you want to speak to that, Director Vanderwall.
Through the mayor, yes, staff can reach out. We've actually got Catherine sitting here who is working with the drainage engineer on this. So yes, staff will reach out and work with affected landowners.
Great, thank you. With that, I would call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And on to the rest of our agenda, and thank you to everyone for joining. I understand if you have to head out. If not, we still have quite a lot on our agenda, and I'd be happy for you to stick around as well. This evening, we do have two specific interest delegations registered to speak to Council on two different items. I will call up those delegates at the appropriate time. We do also have correspondence, including the added, sorry, I'm just making sure. We do also have correspondence, councillors, included the addition to the correspondence from Ninth Valley Eco Boosters regarding the Wilmot Wells application. Did anybody want to pull any correspondence? Councillor Dunstall.
Yes, I actually did want to pull that. Do I need a seconder on that to get it to the floor? Just
no, you're welcome to speak.
Okay, thank you. Director Vanderwall, I have been receiving calls on this, and I had a conversation with you which put my mind to ease, and so I wanted to make sure that it was shared with our constituents. Can you please explain for the gravel pit that is requesting the water, where that water is coming from and where it's going to? Can you do that? Right, that's probably Director Martin's.
Director Martin.
Through Mayor Salonen. So we did receive comments from the hydrogeologist who worked on the initial pit and then has prepared a report in support of the water taking permit. So the term water taking is a bit confusing in this instance because they're not actually removing the water from the site. So it's taking water from one pond and cleans the aggregate and empties it into a pond on the same property. So the water's actually not leaving, it's being recycled on the property. So it is using water, but it's returning the water. The only thing that's lost, the only thing that's taken away from the property is actually what is actually held in the aggregate that's being washed. So there's a small percentage that's absorbed, so that component is lost, but the majority of that large number is retained on the property. So it's not actually being removed. It's being recycled on site.
Councillor Dunstall.
Sorry, just to follow up, Director Martin. So this will not be affecting the water for others. This is just on that gravel pit. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Solomon. So the report originally with the pit as well did evaluate that in some significance. So they basically evaluated that there aren't any impacts on neighboring wells. There's a number of monitoring wells on site and ongoing monitoring in terms of water levels to ensure assumptions don't change. But the information we're receiving from the qualified engineers are that there is no impact.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair. I appreciate the comments, Director Martin. I guess the question ultimately would be, the mention of monitoring wells and data collected to look at the water levels. I mean, I think the overall concern is that we're going to see additional pumping by the region in that exact same vicinity with the existing neighborhood wells, and then you've got this new license being proposed. Is the data for the monitoring wells publicly available, and if not, can it be?
Through Mayor Sullivan. So two things. The aquifer that this pond is not the aquifer that water is drawn from. So it's at a higher aquifer. The other one is separated by an aquitard, and so it's actually lower in the ground is the water that's being drawn for the regional water and the majority of private wells. My understanding, recollection from the hydro-G studies, there was one well a fair distance away that was drawing from the same aquifer. So they had evaluated that and deemed because of its proximity or distance away, I should say, there isn't an impact. So that's the first part. The second part, in terms of the actual monitoring that's provided, so it's provided to MNR and the township. I would have to get an opinion on whether that's public information or not. It's certainly the individuals whose properties it impacts would have access to that information, but how that can be communicated, I can look into that further and get back to you separately if that works.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Martin. Just so I'm clear, was this anticipated in the original license application, or is this something that has been added more recently in terms of the request to wash gravel?
Through Mayor Sullivan. So this was part of the original license. So it was identified in the operations plans. There's a note in the operation plan that says the next step is actually obtaining the approval from MECP for I don't want to use the word taking water, but that's essentially what the terminology is, but for the recycling. But the actual idea of using that water on site was all contemplated in the original approval and in the original hydro-G study. This updated report just speaks to the specific volume that's being asked for as part of the MVCP license.
Any additional questions or comments on that correspondence, councillors? I do just want to note, and I know that council's aware of it, but more so for the public, the take water permit, although again, that's the terminology provided, but the use of that water on that property is solely provincial jurisdiction. And the region, I believe, has the ability to comment on it, but water resources as a whole are provincial resources. So just noting that again. Councillor Wilkinson was, no. Okay, next one. All right, so everybody's fine with correspondence, or are there any other items to pull? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, through the chair. I did receive some comments from constituents regarding 11.2, which the correspondence refers to groundwater extraction and essentially opposition. And you just sort of alluded to what I was hoping could be commented on, but I think a lot of the public keep coming back to the 1980s water agreement that was struck between the township and the region. But as I understand it, and I'm hoping for just some clarity for the public's sake, that is essentially a gentleman's agreement that does not have any, there's no binding under current provincial law. So to be clear, the province dictates the use of water resources, and the region essentially can dictate what it pumps from its aquifers, but the township has no jurisdiction or say over those particular resources in those areas, correct? So even though there's an agreement, it's more of just a gentleman's agreement.
Unfortunately, yes, that is correct. The conversation is still being had at the region, though. At our last meeting at the region, my motion got deferred until Wednesday, which was in essence what our council had put forward. There were a few other minor things in there, but essentially it was asking for a 1-year exemption to the 1980 permit that has been tabled again. It'll be coming to council on Wednesday at the region. You are not wrong, though. If regional council decides that that agreement's no longer valid, that is their decision. Still, however, they would need to go to the province if it is more water that they're taking than what their permit currently allows, and then that is completely provincial jurisdiction as to if they will allow additional water to be taken. One other interesting update that happened at that meeting, the most recent regional meeting, was staff did identify that for the last 2 years, and in their language, they have been doing a pump test for the last 2 years, already drawing that 30 extra liters a second of water from that aquifer. And instead, and again in their language, dumping it into the ditch instead of into the integrated water system. So that is something that I, again at Region, have more questions that need clarifying on, including what pertains to what's allowed to be in a pump test, because 2 years seems like a pretty long time. But regardless, here nor there, yes, your point is correct. Wilmot Township, we do not have jurisdiction over water that is removed from water in our geographic area. That is a Crown provincial resource, and that water agreement of 1980 is a Region of Waterloo motion that Regional Council can choose to overturn or change at any point in time. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, further to your comments, I guess I would look for increased communication or transparency from the region to our township, because I'm getting questions about what's happening at the corner of Gingrich and Sandhills. It seems as a township, we are unaware of what's happening regarding our water resource here in the township. Although we can't control it, at least we should be informed about what's happening in terms of that resource.
And part of the motion that has been referred back to Regional Council does include public access to that information, and reporting on well monitoring as well in the areas. So yes, that is noted. And I believe that was part of our motion as well that we had passed. So, okay. Any other comments or questions on correspondence items? Seeing none. We do have 4 items on our consent agenda. Before we vote on them, does anybody wish to remove an item to speak to it? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I have to get at the right spot. I think it's the service delivery report. Is that part? No, that's after the consent.
That's after consent.
Yes.
The consent items are the GRE level 3 charging station, the schematics updates to the fire station and operations center at Neville, winter operation, plan and adoption, and the agreement authority of execution for the funding that we're getting from the province on the housing enabling infrastructure funding.
Yes, the one I would like to pull is the schematics on the fire station.
And you're welcome to speak to that.
Okay. Through you, Mayor, and I believe Director, I can't look over at his name.
Director Catania is online, but we also have Manager Evie here too.
Yes. To Director Catania, I guess the only thing I was looking at was wondering about the timing of the master plan for fire service, and I believe the timing of that is after our township official plan is complete. And so I was wondering about the quarterly, I think it was identified in the report that it would be Q1 of 2026, yet the master plan isn't going to be completed till Q2 or into Q3. So I'm wondering if we have the ability to get the fire master plan done in that time frame, and therefore we're seeing some of this later on in terms of progression.
I think CAO Wilmer is going to at least start with that.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Cressman, because the start of the fire master plan had to await the adoption of the official plan, in our 26 budget, we deferred the majority of the capital cost of the fire master plan into 27. So it can start in late 26, but the majority of the fire master plan work would not happen until early 27.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions on that particular item? Any other consent agenda items to be pulled? Seeing none, I'd look for a mover and a seconder for those items. Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Now on to our reports, starting with the service delivery review, final report and recommendations. To get this on the floor, if I could have a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Dunstall, and I will now turn it over to CAO Wilmer to present this report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. I will speak just briefly to this because it was presented in detail 3 weeks ago at Committee of the Whole. So this service delivery and operational review was completed by Strategy Corps, and it's a very solid report. What's attached to the agenda for Council tonight is both the current state report, which was completed in November, as well as the final recommendations from late January. The final recommendations includes 7 initiatives for the near term and an additional 13 initiatives to enable long-term success. And it's worth noting that in the implementation roadmap, even the long-term success enabling actions, many of them are starting immediately. So while they're to enable long-term success, it's not as though they're waiting for the long-term to get started. At least quite a number of them. There's a few of them that are not starting until year 3, 4, 5.
Thank you. With that, are there any questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, one item I wanted to clarify is I know there's a number of new positions suggested within the service delivery review. I want to be very clear that adopting or receiving this report will not necessarily lead to the automatic implementation or budgeting of these positions, but rather those will be discussed at budget time and brought to council for approval when appropriate.
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct.
Councillor Wilkinson again.
Thank you. Through the chair. I realize that this is part of the public record and can be accessed through the agenda. I'm just wondering out loud, and perhaps I know Brett, our communications manager, is not here, but I'm wondering if this is something that we could have a dedicated page on the website for that essentially would track some of those desired outcomes and essentially have the reports available and the tracker to show the progress on the improvements. I don't know if that requires an amendment or if anyone's agreeing, but I would like to see that.
Through the mayor, we can take that as direction. Thank you.
Any other questions on this, Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I think through you, Mayor, to CAO Wilmer, I was of the same opinion, and it was the recommendation that staff be authorized to implement the near-term recommendations of the service delivery, etc., if they can be accomplished with the current available resources. And to me, that worried me a little bit, whether it was giving a green light to all those positions. And so as I'm understanding this, again, to reiterate that council will have the approval of any new positions. This is a green light. That was what I was wanting to pull out of this.
Through the mayor, yes, I confirm that. The one exception to that is the one additional position that council already did approve in the budget, which is Director of Corporate Services and Deputy CAO as one position.
All right. I don't see any other questions. We do have a delegate on this item. Mr. Wolf, if you want to come up, you'll have 7 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Why are you smiling, Stuart? He's so pleased to see me. You know that I'm here for 2 reasons, basically. 1, to track the process of how you make decisions, and 2, how you spend the taxpayers' money. And this one deals with the first one, how you make decisions. And I've been tracking this process for a couple of years, as you know, because I've delegated on the previous report from the previous consultant and had some constructive suggestions which were negatively perceived. I'm outstandingly pleased at this report. This is superb. And I'm just going to reiterate a couple of things that CIO Wilmer's pointed out. I'm focusing on the 20 because that's the meat of the matter. I'm really attracted to number 8 on the right-hand side, to strengthen the township's corporate communications and marketing to improve consistency, coordination, and effectiveness. That's the website, I think. That is, in the education business, we used to call it CRDI, Curriculum Review, Development, Implementation. That's a process of cycle. The bicycle wheel just keeps rolling down the road. And part of that process is supervision, standards, accountability, and reporting of that. And that part is, we're going to see it in the public. That's a commitment when implemented. That's good. Another one stands out to me is number 1 in the right-hand side, improve the long-term financial resilience and decision-making. I don't know how you're going to do that, but it needs to be done, and I'm really good to see. I'm pleased at that. The asset management, budgeting dollars, superb. Government's capacity and technology, that to me says you're looking for new skills. We're in 2026, we're heading to 2030, you're looking for a new set of skills. We can't do things the same way we've always done just because we've always done it that way. I do not like to hear anybody say, we do it this way because we've always done it that way. And you proved it to let us do it that way. It's got to stop. It's in here, it's going to change. So what we're looking for in the implementation process, I would suggest, are new faces. Young faces. We got some new faces in new places. That's what we need. We need new skills, new faces. The corporate culture will change. We're in a transition here. The corporate culture has to change. We can't have the old faces in new places. We need new faces in new places. That's my opinion. Number 6 on the right-hand side. Assign responsibility and dedicate resources to build morale within the organization, improve corporate culture. That's exactly what I just said. New faces, new places, new culture, new way of doing business. And the last one I'd like to build on is a resilient corporate leadership team. New blood. You got to get new skills for the 30s. Artificial intelligence is coming in. It can be a benefit, it can be helpful, but you got to have people who know what they're doing. They got to have the skills to be able to do it. I'm 77. I'm the wrong guy. I can comment about it, but you need the young guys to do it. And girls, gals, she, he, whatever the right word is, they, them. This is the 3rd version that I've seen. The final, 110 interim, and then was the original. That was the Weitzel one. The one I could never find the final report on, and you couldn't either. So I guess I'm wondering, financial considerations. There's no direct financial implications of receiving this report. You're right. And that's been clarified about hiring and all that kind of stuff. But this report cost us a bunch of money. We had to pay Weitzel, and we had to pay Strategy Corps. And I'd like clarification. I'm going to throw out a couple of numbers, and maybe my ward councillor can ask somebody to confirm them. But my numbers, I think we've so far paid Weitzel either $64,698 or $65,536. That's $65,536 to Weitzel, and we never got a report. And I think I heard Strategy Corps was something about $100,000. I'll leave it at that. So my question is, can I get an answer on how much it did cost us? And my final, again, I'll say it, this is great. This is a transition for moving this corporation from an old culture to a new culture with a new way of doing things and making decisions and spending money. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Just before I go to Councillor Dunstall, a note on the question about the cost. So this work, to be very clear, is separate from the original White Cell report that you had referenced. This work was a decision of council to go out for RFP to a maximum of $100,000. We made that decision, I believe, in August, I think, of last year. It was the summer of last year. And that RFP came back at $99,500, so $99,500 for the strategy core report.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said about White Cell, how much it cost?
That one, I said, that is a separate report. That information staff can provide to you. I do not have that exact number off the top of my head. I was referencing the report before us, the strategy core work. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. This is a comment. I just wanted to say that I was flabbergasted that you said something was great and that you were very pleased. So I just wanted to tell you that I was pleased that you were very pleased with this report. I was kind of taken aback. I was glad I was sitting down, but I want to thank you for acknowledging all the great work in that report.
You stole my word, flabbergasted.
There you go. Thank you.
All right. Were there any other questions for the delegate? Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, not necessarily the delegate, but to his point, the White Cell report, can we either get it now or in the future, just the approximate cost of that, and maybe just a brief status update to it? I realize we don't have the report for a variety of reasons, but just for general public knowledge, please.
I would say that staff could bring back that information, as that was not a part of tonight's report.
Sufficient.
We do have it, but it'll just be reported at a later date to council. With that, any other questions or comments on this particular motion? I would need a mover and a seconder for this report. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. All those in favour, and that carries unanimously. Now on to report 13.2, and this is the council remuneration review for the 2026 to 2030 term. And I will turn it over to CAO Wilmer to present this report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. The council remuneration review policy sets out 3 different options that are available to council for a method of review. One is a citizen review committee. The second is an independent review consultant. And the third is an internal administrative review. Any of those 3 options is available to you. The report speaks very briefly to each one of them. So I won't elaborate on that, but it's before you to determine which method you prefer.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Cressman.
Yes, in my mind, I think the third item is the one that I would be leaning towards, and can I speak to it without passing a motion? I think number 2 things. We've had the Penske report a number of years ago when we adjusted our grids, and we could apply the cost of living increases that were granted for the different years up to 2026 and added on to what the original Penske report was, and then compare that to the work that the former clerk did and compare the salary range that was reflected in 2025 salaries and add the cost of living that was made this current year and see how the 2 align, and that could be a report to council to make a decision on. I see that as being the yardsticks by which we would be informed very well about how to make the decision.
And just to clarify, number 3 in the report is for the internal administrative review, so for staff to bring back information. Were there any other comments or questions amongst council? Councillor Sadoo.
Yeah, thank you. My thoughts while reading this report, initially my thinking was to go to option one, which is a citizen review committee, but given the lack of time, ultimately it was a balancing act between option 2 and 3, rather doing an internal review or an independent review. At this point, I'm leaning more towards option 2, which is an independent review. I just feel having a third party come in that has no bias to council, essentially come in and say where the remuneration should be and comparators within municipalities. I know there was also talk about changing the mayor's position from part-time to full-time. I think having an independent third-party review come in with a fresh set of eyes is something that could be important. We all know that council's not doing this for the pay. Having said that, we also want to ensure that it is something that is attractive enough to have good candidates running in the future, and not a deterrent where people look at the time and effort that's needed to be on council and they look at the pay and say, that's not for me. If we do want young, well-established candidates to run, we do need something that is competitive within reason, within what we have within our surrounding municipalities. So I would, at this moment, be leaning towards option number 2, which is an independent review.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments on this, Council? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll be honest, thinking about this one in general, I really more than anything would love for it to be a citizen review. But I agree with the conclusion that ultimately it is likely just too short of a window to make anything like that happen, because recruitment and filling of those positions would essentially have to happen by the end of this week, and then multiple meetings. So I don't know that that's feasible. And then, to be honest, I think there's 2 reasonable arguments for both option 2 and 3. I'm not sure where I land, to be quite honest with you. I think I'd like to hear from everyone on this matter and engage their opinion. I mean, I think option 3 obviously is a good way to save some money and potentially build on what data we already have. And to Councillor Cressman's point, that could be taking into account our previously passed upon cost of living adjustments, which could then be applied to the future incoming term of council. Or option 2, which is more of a review, but I don't know. I guess I would have to understand what exactly that would entail and how much of that work that we have already completed may be salvageable by said group. So I don't know. I'd maybe be interested in hearing from the administrative staff regarding option 2 and what is the potential scope of that and how feasible that item is as well.
CAO Wilmot.
Excuse me. Through the mayor, the council did already have an independent review consultant during this term of council. The Pesci report is fairly current. It's only 2 years old. And so I'm not sure that there's much value to getting another consultant to tell you what you just had a consultant tell you 2 years ago.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, given I don't have that report in front of me, I don't know how, if you have it to reference it, but the actual scope of that, did it entail council remuneration as well, or is it solely looking at staff?
Through the mayor to Councillor Wilkinson, yes, it looked at councillor remuneration and mayoral remuneration, and it was summarized in the report that the clerk brought in September of 25.
I guess, well, I'm waiting for other comments, or Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I realize time is our enemy in this particular topic. However, I believe we have a committee of the whole meeting next week. I'm wondering if it would be feasible to provide a summary or at least attach both of those reports back to this item and have it deferred to or referred over to the committee of the whole meeting next week. So that way everyone could refresh their memory and review the material.
Staff are saying that's feasible time-wise. Before you actually table that, I have a few comments. I do agree wanting to see that Pesci report because I didn't recall when I got it that they actually went into detail on a full review of council remuneration versus just saying council should receive COLA. So yes, I would also like to review that. But I guess the other thing I would say, I don't disagree in a perfect world. I would like it to be a committee of the public. I also agree with the staff report that we don't have enough time for that. The biggest reason that personally I would be leaning to option 2, which is going to a consultant, is a few things. One, I do sit on the AMO Healthy Democracy Advisory Committee, and that goal is to encourage multiple people from any and every diverse background to want to engage in and run into municipal politics. And that work, in addition to a growing body of research, and I know I've already shared this around this horseshoe, is that a huge barrier to people running is compensation. I would also argue that simply looking at what our comparators are doing isn't addressing the root cause of why a lot of people choose not to run. Even just anecdotally, I know I've spoken to over 5 people in the community who've expressed interest to run in the next election, and then once they realize the time commitment versus the compensation, it's not feasible. That's for varying different reasons, but one that was a really interesting one was a single parent, and child care would cost them almost the amount of what they'd be compensated in being able to attend and meet their duties, is what they said as a counselor. So I certainly, in my opinion, don't want to see people discouraged from the opportunity of running and bringing a voice around the table on a financial component. The other reason that I'd be leaning towards a consultant, even with the Pesci work, depending on what exactly it says, is the fact that this municipality now has strong mayors. And again, this is not an argument about whether strong mayors legislation should or should not exist, but at the end of the day, it is giving the person in the seat of mayor far more legislative scope in terms of roles and responsibility. And in any other job, if your responsibilities were changed or your scope was changed to that role, a review of that role would be a normal process to go through. And that hasn't been done in any municipality because we are going into the first election cycle with strong mayors across the entire province. So I would also be curious as to an in-depth look and understanding of that role because it's changed dramatically. I'd also argue that a lot of our neighboring municipalities and our own don't currently account for even the last 20 years how much the role of council has changed and councillors have changed in terms of speaking to people on council from the early 2000s when email wasn't really a thing, you didn't have your cell phone attached to your hip, you weren't expected to be on social media. I think roles and expectations and again scope has really changed over time, and I don't know that I've really seen that thoroughly reflected in any reports, including the staff report that we did receive back in the fall. So I would personally be looking for something to look and assess the roles as they are and as they exist today, and what those requirements are. Not to say that staff aren't capable of that, but I think staff also have quite a work plan, including an upcoming election for the department that would be responsible for this report. So I am leaning personally at this time towards a consultant, but I agree, I want to see what that Pesci work is to refresh my memory as to how in-depth it went into council compensation. But wanted to put in my 2 cents on that. Councillor Wilkinson, did you want to move your motion for referral? Something else first?
Through the chair, just thinking, I appreciate your comments. And it's yes, well taken. Regarding the Pesci report, if I'm not mistaken, and this is where I think it gets into an area, and perhaps because it was 2 years ago, but I believe it was delivered verbally enclosed. I don't know that we actually received a written report. So, with that said, I hope that doesn't complicate anything, and perhaps we can refer to the clerk for guidance on that.
I would say staff will bring it forward in whatever appropriate manner. So if it is a manner for closed or not, they'll be able to pick out the parts of that report and report it appropriately to council. Councillor Cressman.
So I just can't let this one go, sorry. Yes, the mayor's role has changed, responsibilities has changed, and so has council's responsibilities. They have been diminished. So does that mean we take a pay cut? So I think that's the reality of the situation. On the one hand, you speak eloquently about AMO wanting the best candidates and a range of candidates, and yet at the same time, the expectation of what councillors have and they can control and make decisions on has been reduced. So I think that's the conundrum that we're in, and so maybe we should make it an autocracy and allow the mayor to make all the decisions and save the township a whole lot of money. That's me being a little tongue-in-cheek here, and I realize the province made the decision, but it is a point of personal frustration.
I hear and understand that. I would still argue that council is underpaid, to be honest, for the amount of work and expectations of responsibility. That is my own personal conviction. And I would again also stress that council's decision-making authority didn't change. It was just that the mayor, if they choose to exercise, now does have a different ability. And again, that is up to each individual mayor in the seat at the time. But certainly your point is noted. Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other comments or questions at this time on this report? Councillor Wilkinson, did you want to put forward your motion to refer?
Through the chair, if there's no further comments or discussions, then I would move to amend that we ask staff to report back with the summary prepared by our previous clerk, in addition to the Pesci report at the committee of the whole meeting scheduled for Monday, March 2nd. And I suppose at that time we would likely, given the timeline, probably need to have a special council meeting at the same time to push it through. I'm seeing a nod, I don't know.
Okay, that part can be dealt with after, but what's actually before us is that this be referred to committee of the whole for next week and include the additional information of both, again, the staff report that came forward in the fall and of the Pesci report to be provided to council for information and then further consideration at committee. So that's been moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries unanimously. On to 13.4, and this is the Waterloo Regional Police Services CCTV camera agreement. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Sadoo, and I will invite our Manager of Parks and Facilities, Cody Eby, to present this report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. This report is seeking approval from Council to enter into an agreement with Waterloo Regional Police Services for installation of CCTV cameras on municipal property for law enforcement purposes. Waterloo Regional Police Service intends to access video footage from their own CCTV cameras to support the reduction of crime, increase public safety, improve quality evidence for criminal investigations, and to extend the frontline and investigative resources of the police service. Waterloo Regional Police Service has approached the various municipalities that make up the region to implement video camera capacity to support frontline operations and improve investigative outcomes. The goal is to balance further public safety with an individual's right to privacy. Staff are seeking approval from council on entering into an agreement for the potential of CCTV cameras that may be located on municipal property. Happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you very much, Manager Eby. We'll go to Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Eby, I'm curious, which townships have adopted this policy, or which cities and townships have adopted this and which have not?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Wilkinson. That is information I do not have at this time. That is, I believe most are probably in sessions as well. If that's something we can kind of get back to you later for.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I did want to actually have a discussion about this with my peers, but I did want to hear the delegate first. So I'm not sure where we are, and it's obviously your call, Mayor, when you call him up, but I would like to make a comment once he speaks.
Yes, and Mr. Bell is coming up after council has their questions. So any other questions or comments at this time? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, again, I realize, Mr. B, you may not have all the answers to this, given that you are sitting in place of our director this evening. Have the police indicated any plans to expand this program or perhaps enhance the technology beyond what its initial proposal is at the moment?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Wilkinson. At this point, I believe they are in a phase 1 implementation, which would be just including locations amongst the region. And as far as their grant opportunity can take them, I'm not aware of any phase 2 at this point, but right now they're just focusing on phase 1.
And I believe Director Catania is online with a comment as well.
Councillor Wilkinson, just to further on Mayor Eby's comments there, the Waterloo Regional Police Services are not looking at expanding this through any further technological advances with this program at this point in time, so there won't be really any other type of AI surveillance or any of that nature. This is just strictly to look at the installation of crime prevention purposes, CCTV cameras with their analytics to actually show what could be potential hotspots within the region.
Thank you. Any Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Catania. I guess the question I had is, it's the data that the police services has that determines if a camera is required, and if no cameras are required, they're obviously not going to spend money or use the funds, the limited funds that are available to put cameras where there's no data to support it. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
Councillor Preston, that is correct. They do have limited funds through a grant opportunity from the province. And from my understanding, it's really the implementation is really a proportionate basis through the region. So as a municipality of our side, we really see limited CCTV cameras, and from what I can hear at this point, we're looking at one installation of a camera. At this point, that location has not yet been determined, but when it is determined, it will be posted on the Waterloo Regional Police Services website.
Thank you. Any other questions at this moment, councillors? Okay, seeing none, we do have a registered delegation for this item, and that's Mr. Bell. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
Good evening. Thanks everyone for having me. I do not have anything to say about storm drains. I am here to talk about the police cameras. My name is Jeff Bell, and I live in Wilmot, in New Hamburg, in fact. And my family and I moved here about 9 years ago. They're here tonight. We chose this town because we could tell it was a safe place where neighbors knew each other and looked out for each other. We've had our cars rummaged through in the middle of the night
We've had people walking through our backyard that we didn't know, and there have been cars stolen from driveways on our street. We started locking our doors, stopped leaving valuables in the car, and joined a neighborhood group chat. Never once did police cameras cross my mind at all. I'm not trying to minimize the experiences of those people that were affected by or have been affected by serious crime, but that type of personal responsibility and community connection that I have with my neighbors is what keeps me grounded and comfortable in this community. When I heard about the possibility of cameras in Wilmot, it shocked me enough to take a deeper look. Most concerning to me is something that has already been mentioned, is that this council is being asked to approve a bylaw before knowing where the cameras will go or what local evidence was used to decide where they're going to go. Those locations are going to be shared later, and in my opinion, that justification should come first before you say yes or no. I have reviewed the publicly available police data from 2019 to 2024, and what that showed me is a community that is significantly safer than the region around it. The police chief himself even said that Wilmot is a very safe community. Most individual communities in this township see single-digit annual serious crime figures, and New Hamburg, the most populated in the area, accounts for a smaller share of serious crime than its population would suggest. This underscores the need for a deeper analysis and understanding of local crime patterns and a clear justification for police surveillance wherever the cameras are planned. We have all seen social media posts saying that car theft is on the rise and something needs to be done. The data I reviewed does not support those claims. Vehicle thefts in the township have essentially been the same for the last 5 years. We are not a community in crisis. We are one of the safest places in Waterloo region. Feeling unsafe is different from being unsafe. That disconnect is highlighted in a recent CBC report about a survey that found up to 70% of Kitchener residents believe that various crimes were increasing, while the data showed that many of those categories had actually decreased. Chief Crowell, he acknowledged that perception is reality for many people, but he encouraged residents to take a look at 5-year trends to get a true sense of what was happening. A Wilfrid Laurier criminologist interviewed for the same piece pointed to social media and community Facebook groups as magnifiers of fear, amplifying misleading or inaccurate representations of what's really going on. His recommendations were better lighting, neighborhood watch programs, and greater police presence, not cameras. In July of last year, the chief presented this council with an updated policing strategy, including a commitment to reestablishing a physical community office in Wilmot and a model built on targeted responses, accountability, and tailored solutions. Rural Sergeant Jay Heiser said that he would be ensuring officers become public-facing members of their communities, and his mission was to show residents of the townships that WRPS is present, engaged, and listening. In November, this council was presented with a surveillance program. The success stories cited a Peterborough homicide investigation, York region reduction in violent crime, and a stabbing in downtown Guelph. These are compelling examples, but they're urban settings, they're high density, and they're high crime. Wilmot is none of those things. The only Wilmot-specific justification offered at that meeting was a home invasion that had occurred just the week prior, a single anecdotal incident. And when the question was asked why Woolwich had decided not to participate, the deputy chief couldn't say. What was explicit in that WRPS is that WRPS has a 10-year plan for this program. And in their words, they have never seen it go backwards anywhere else. It's not a pilot. This is a permanent infrastructure with planned expansion and endless possibilities of surveillance capabilities. Endless possibilities were in the transcript. We've gone from a policing strategy built on presence and connection to surveillance in less than 1 year. I would genuinely like to know what has changed between that vision and this proposal.
These cameras are intended to curb violent crime in urban settings. That does not describe Wilmot. This is not a tailored approach, and it carries real costs. Research has shown that police surveillance can negatively affect communities and their residents. People are often less likely to organize, gather, and participate freely in public life when they feel like they're being watched. It can also create a false sense of security and reduce our natural vigilance. In a community like ours, those social costs should not be dismissed. The most comprehensive study spanning 40 years shows that passive surveillance has little to no measurable effect in low-crime residential settings. And I know I don't have a lot of time left, but I'm going to try and squeeze it in. Based on multiple chats I've had with people around town, I'm not the only resident that's very uncomfortable with this proposal. Other concerns include the normalization of surveillance in our community, data storage and cybersecurity risk, and cross-border cloud hosting. All those issues deserve transparency and should be taken into account. My hope is that Council does not proceed with this bylaw. Not because safety doesn't matter, but because permanent surveillance infrastructure is one of the most invasive and unsettling strategies available. It affects every resident, every visitor, and every daily action within camera range. And its effectiveness is not proven in a mostly rural and low-crime area like ours. A program like that should have an extremely high bar for justification based on local evidence. If the goal is to improve safety and address residents' concerns, the tools already described are more appropriate. Visible police presence, community engagement, and targeted responses based on local data. Those are the tools that strengthen community bonds, that make Wilmot safe, and help keep people safe and feel safe. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bell, and to your family for also joining and lasting through a pretty long meeting agenda. Councillors, were there any questions for Mr. Bell directly? No? Okay. I don't see any questions directly for you. Thank you again for joining us. Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. One of the things that I really like about the Committee of the Whole is that it gives us an opportunity to have some time in between when our residents can speak with us. I had originally voted in favor of the cameras, but I have had several constituents reach out to me. Of course, Mr. Bell was one of them. And so I did reach out to the WRPS, and here is what they told me as to how they decided where these cameras went. And they used a stratified policing model. In simple terms, it means policing resources are organized in layers and guided by data. Police look at where crime occurs, what type of incidents are happening, and when and where risks are highest. And I did speak to one of my contacts at the police department, and what they said was that this was done over 3 years, a 3-year course of calls that they received from constituents. So he was telling me it was more about the calls received and about our constituents reaching out to them. I'm still not sure of where I'm sitting on this, and so I was really hoping that the wisdom of my fellow councillors might be able to share if they still have the same position that they did before, or if that has changed due to constituents or their own, viewpoints have changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go to Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, through the chair. First and foremost, I would have to say I agree quite a bit with our delegate, Jeff, this evening. So I thank him for coming and expressing his concern. And, I appreciate that Councillor Dunstall is taking things under consideration and that you reached out to the police and received a response. I personally have not changed my opinion, and if anything, I've written down some ideas here and some thoughts. I mean, I still think, in general, this is a program that we should be taking a wait-and-see approach on, and I'm opposed to proceeding forward with this. I think there are risks, audit protocols that we're unaware of, what the potential breaches or breach response could look like, and ultimately we have no control over the oversight, and that leads to a bunch of privacy concerns for me. I think at the end of the day, let's just use an example here. The last time cameras went up across this province, the public turned on them very quickly. And my concern is that while this is potentially a program to try and present safety, and don't get me wrong, I'm in favor of public safety and wanting crime to be reduced, but I'm not sure that putting cameras up that would be accessed after a crime is necessarily going to reduce occurrences. It may aid in an investigation. However, putting the camera up, if someone is going to commit a violent crime, it's likely that they're doing it in a moment of passion, or they're not aware of an individual they're trying to assault or worse. They're not going to look around and say, hey, there's a camera there, we should maybe move down the road if you don't mind. It's never going to happen. So I don't know that they actually achieve the outcome that they're being proposed for. I think ultimately there are concerns around what happens to these cameras down the road. I did some further research actually after speaking with Mr. Bell, and the actual technology being proposed, and this is publicly available information, well, it can be used for surveillance and accessing CCTV after a crime event, which is currently what they are proposing. This technology is powerful enough that down the road it could be used for facial recognition, it could be used for ongoing surveillance. Let's use an example. If you happen to jaywalk across Peel Street, are they going to send you a ticket in the mail? The technology's there. That to me raises concerns. I think the general public are due a certain level of privacy in their lives, and while no one should really have anything to hide, I think at the end of the day there are little things or little infractions that may occur that don't necessarily require an investigation or a ticket, and I fear that this could lead down that path. I think the lack of future use definition and control over that is troubling, and I think, one of their other reasons is talking about large events. I mean, if a large disturbance or public safety event takes place, I don't want someone in an office reviewing camera footage. I want boots on the ground. I want police to be present. So I'm not sure that this actually achieves the ultimate outcome or the proposed outcome. And one other point, and I'm glad this was raised, is that the feeling of being unsafe. I agree the statistics would 100% point to a drop in crime. And I'll be the first one to admit, I feel differently about that. I know the stats say one thing, however, we feel as though we're seeing increased crime. And I think part of that is due to social media. People have doorbell cams. And if something takes place on their property, the first thing they do is they post that and say, hey, be on the lookout for this. So we see that constantly being put in our face. And I think it leads to people feeling like this is happening all of the time. But I think, in fact, it's maybe not as common as we think, and the stats would point to that. So, yes, there are cameras out there. Yes, there's surveillance out there, but I have a doorbell cam, I have a street cam, but I have control of that. It's for me. I have very grave concerns about granting future access to township CCTV or even allowing for these CCTV cameras to go up within our township. Privacy being the biggest one. I think our public are due their own personal privacy, and ultimately I don't want to lead into a big brother police state. It really, really concerns me. Final point, we don't know who's controlling this data. We don't know where this data is stored. We don't know what potential breach of this data could be. And again, reading that this has facial recognition capabilities, let's play hypothetical and say you are caught doing something that, say for instance, the United States frowns upon. What if the data is stored in the United States and they basically choose to commandeer that data? Does that affect your ability to get across the border in the future? These are all the questions that I have, but I'm not seeing clear answers to. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I am totally opposed to this program. Thank you.
Any other councillors to do?
Not quite as passionate as that. I'm not too worried about the United States watching me crosswalk. But okay, so I did have some soul searching with this, and I did talk with some fellow residents. I am more of the approach of a let's wait and see. This is new. Not all the municipalities and townships are on board with this yet, and I don't necessarily think this is something we should be front and center of. To the delegate's point, we're not a big city. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So yes, there is merit to big cities having something like this. But growing up in a small town in nearby Tavistock and now in Baden, to my fellow councillor's point, it does make a difference with social media now. Everything is more front and center, whereas 20 years ago, if something happened, it would take a couple of business days to get back to you through the grapevine. I would also say Highway 78 is under the control of the MTO, and they already have cameras. So our main artery through Wilmot Township already has cameras. One of my biggest fears is unwanted consequences of having cameras. I've worked in a field where I was working in jails. Cameras came in, and yes, they did do some good, but they don't replace the officers on the scene. And there were unwanted consequences of staff discipline from cameras, which was not initially intended for. Finally, my final point is one of my biggest fears is this will somehow replace boots on the ground and police presence. I know Wilmot residents, especially New Hamburg residents, were not happy to see the police station move just because we have lack of police presence and you're seeing the officers in the cars. So that is one of my major fears, is if we go down this road of surveillance, will they start pulling officers back and redistributing them to other municipalities or the cities? So at this point, I am not in favor of the cameras. I am more in favor of a let's wait and see approach. And once we can see more data and history from other municipalities or other places that they've used this technology, I would be voting not in favor tonight.
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through Mayor. I just want to make something clear. My conversations have indicated that it's one camera and that there's no implication that boots on the ground would be affected. And I think making that comment is just a little presumptuous. So I just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I guess I look at this, and for the people of my ward, this has no implication because we're not big enough to ever consider that we had boots on the ground on a consistent basis, or will see boots on the ground in New Dundee or Mannheim. I think the question is this piece of technology something that will assist in retrospect to assist in the apprehension of someone who committed a major crime? And I think we can put a lot of scare specifics around it, and nothing kills an idea better than fear. I think the question is, what is the parameters that are put around it? Do we have control and can say yay or nay in terms of its location? Can we have a legal agreement that puts guardrails and barriers around what this would be used for and how long the data would be stored? And we can put fear around, well, yes, neighborhood watches are better. Of course they are. And this isn't ruling that out. In terms of the presentation that was at the New Dundee Community Centre last year, they said the best thing you can do is take a few minutes and copy details down rather than just saying, I saw somebody I didn't know out on the street in a vehicle I didn't know. Well, take a few minutes and copy some information down. indicating what you saw, and that causes, at least gives information in terms of a responding officer. So I maybe I'm impacted by last Friday. I sat down with a private owner who has a camera on an intersection that had 14 crashes last year, up from 4 the previous year, and there was 2 so far this year, serious crash, and we could go back, and that camera information is stored on a private computer in that office, and it only lasts for 2 weeks, and a camera prints over top of it. So I think there's technology that will protect us in terms of how these are used and implemented. And so I don't know if Director Catania is still online, but I'm wondering what the guardrails are around this technology as we look, as we consider implementation.
Yes, Director Catania.
Thank you. Just a little through you, Mayor Salmon, to Councillor Pressman, there would be guardrails in this agreement. Privacy impact assessments would have to be conducted. And again, when it comes to locations that would be deemed appropriately by Waterloo Regional Police Services, that's something they would be consulting with the township on, internally with township staff and our clerk's department as well. And from a guardrail perspective, I wouldn't say we're going to dictate where the camera would go necessarily, but if we feel like it's not an appropriate location for privacy reasons or based on the privacy impact assessment as well, we can deny that request. And at this point in time, I want to reiterate what was said at the committee of the whole meeting too. Waterloo Regional Police Services is going around to all the smaller tier municipalities as well. We know that there are provincial highways like 7, 8, as well as regional roads, and they want to make sure that they're getting some type of blessing or permission from the local townships, because they could go ahead and put them potentially on regional roads or on 7, 8. But they want to make sure that they have that buy-in from the community, so that's the reason why the report is also tabled for you tonight.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, to Director Catania, I had previously asked about what towns chose not to adopt this technology. And I know we had a brief conversation about reaching out to them to understand why. Did you uncover anything?
Through Councillor Wilkinson, or sorry, through you, Mayor Salmon, Councillor Wilkinson, we were able to get that data shared by those municipalities. I think some of those conversations did happen within their own closed session, so it's something that I wasn't able to report publicly at this point.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry, through the chair as a follow-up, but how many other townships did not adopt this program?
Through you, Mayor Salmon, and Councillor Wilkinson, I know there's one city that has delegated to do it. There are, I believe, a couple of other municipalities that have declined, but I have to get back to you. And again, I'm not sure if I can really present that in open session.
Okay. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if I can table or ask that we hold off on this until we get more information from more constituents. I'm not sure if there's an appetite for that here, or if we just want to go for the vote, but I would ask that we give a little bit more time.
So you absolutely can table a deferral to an identified time and place. I guess the other thing I would note is if we didn't choose to do a deferral, and for example, if it got defeated, it doesn't prevent any future from council from considering this again at another point in time. I do, just before you table that, want to add in a few comments of my own. I appreciate both what our resident provided, and I know other conversations that I've had with residents on this matter and what's been said tonight. I have been supportive up to this point and really appreciate the work that Director Catania's staff have put into this to getting to this point, and I have, to this point, voted in favor of it. However, one tipping point for me actually was the huge backlash across North America to the Ring ad campaign during the Super Bowl. And I don't know if people know exactly what I'm referencing, but the doorbell Ring cameras, they had a Super Bowl ad that clearly they thought from a communications perspective looked like a great thing. It essentially said using AI technology, they can do a search party for if somebody's dog goes missing in a neighborhood, and they can use all of the cameras as a way to essentially piecemeal together where your dog could have gotten to. This received huge backlash, and not just in the States, but also in Canada, about how when these cameras were first initially sold, this type of capability of use wasn't something that people were informed of, and how that has now evolved. And to some of the points made tonight and in the past on this is, when was their consent for this technology suddenly changing and upgrading? I share some of those concerns on proceeding with the camera agreement, and I'd like to be clear, this isn't to hate on what WRPS are trying to do, or for that matter, the grant that they've received to be able to do this, but I do think, looking bigger picture into some of the points that Mr. Bell shared, a lot of this technology is currently being used in large urban settings, and it's being used across jurisdictions to track bigger crime issues going on, which again aren't necessarily reflective of what's going on in Wilmot. So I think for those reasons, I'm kind of at a sober second thought of, I don't know if this is the right time for us to proceed, and I think I'm aligning a bit more with what's kind of been said tonight of getting some more information to see how this is rolled out. One of the other things, and I know Councillor Sadhu mentioned it, but is the CCTV footage on MTO, so on the highway, and that was one of the things when WRPS presented this idea, that they wanted it to kind of be located at our ins and outs of our community. And I appreciate we have other ways to get into the community than just the highway, but when we're generally speaking of the big crime that they're discussing, it's quickest access to the 401. And 7-8 is one of those ways. I also appreciate New Dundee is a way that's a route there as well, though. But I guess really where I'm going is, right now, I don't know, and especially because it looks like we might be one of the first in the region to adopt this, I don't know that I want us to be the guinea pigs on this project. But in the future, perhaps this is something to be reevaluated. And I would also put out that right now, if WRPS were investigating retrospectively on something, there is still nothing stopping the regular relationship that we have, that they could have access to footage, both our footage. I know the school boards have the same kind of thing as well, that they can access the exact footage for a time period that they're looking on a case-by-case basis. And that's kind of where my comfort level sits a little bit more, especially hearing from residents that that's where a lot of them tend to be. But Councillor Dunstall. Sorry, Councillor Martin.
So through you, Mayor Sallin, I have mixed thoughts on this topic. Up till now, I have been in support of us moving forward with an agreement with the Waterloo Regional Police. I respect Mr. Bell's opinions, and I'm hoping that we can meet to talk personally. I'd put out that invitation to him. I've had a few other people reach out to me also expressing concern, saying that we should vote against this. At the same time, I do see the benefit of cooperating with the police. I think having access can bring some benefit to people in the community when problems occur. And so I'm not sure that I would vote against it at this point. I think that it's important to put in safeguards, and I think the safeguards could be there that would be beneficial. I do worry. I see some Facebook groups where they post a picture of somebody that people think is suspicious, and so already in the community there's a kind of at times what I would call a vigilantism that I worry about. And so I think the more that we can talk about this in the public and have some safeguards, the police are under safeguards that they have requirements of what that they have to adhere to. So I have different thoughts on it. I don't have to say a lot more. I know there have been a lot of thoughts expressed on this.
Thank you. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. One of the things I love about this is that I get to change my mind when I hear people share their views, which I may not necessarily have considered. So having said that, my question to you is, Mayor, rather than putting through something asking for a deferral, if we do not accept this evening, then what happens to this? Does it just temporarily go away and can be brought up again, or what's the process?
That was the note that was just passed to me, but I will have our clerk just address what that would entail.
Through the mayor to council, council could choose to postpone indefinitely the main motion currently on the floor. There's no deadline as to when the matter would have to be raised again, but it can be raised again in the future. That would require a majority vote.
Okay, then I would withdraw and just suggest that we put it off indefinitely.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Dunstall. Councillor Cressman, is that to second or to speak to?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Did you also want to speak to it?
Yes, please. I think we've waffled on this long enough. I think I read the tea leaves around the horseshoe. I can see the reasons why we're reticent to be the guinea pigs on this one. And as well, I think staff have invested enough time on this, and there's other things that they need to get on to. So I think it's the appropriate decision to postpone any implementation.
Very good. All right, with that, I just want to make sure, Director Catania, did you turn on your camera to make a comment?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, not a problem. I just noticed you in the background there, so I wanted to make sure. All right, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I understand. So what's being suggested at the moment is that we defer this indefinitely. I suppose my question for clarification would be, wouldn't it be more prudent to defeat? And then if it is intended to come back to council for discussion, it could be reopened with a 2/3 majority vote to reconsider?
Clerk on that.
Through you, Mayor, to council, that could be done. Currently, you do have the motion on the floor to postpone indefinitely, so.
I suppose I would also throw out there, it doesn't, because of the timing right now, and if it's the feeling of not wanting to be guinea pigs, I don't know that this council would be dealing with the matter again. So the 2/3 vote wouldn't need to happen because it would be a future council, so it wouldn't be a reconsideration in the same term. So really the same effect is happening regardless of if we turn it down or proceed with this particular vote. In that case, then I don't see any other comments or questions. So this would be to indefinitely, essentially defer this till potentially another time that somebody wants to bring it up again. So all those in favor, all those opposed, and that's carried. On to our last report of the evening, and this one is coming from Committee of the Whole, and this is regarding the Municipal Accommodation Tax Funding Allocation Request. To get this on the floor, if I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Dunstall, and I will turn it over to Director Martin to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. Given we had significant discussion at Committee of the Whole, I will not have any additional comments, but can certainly answer questions if there are any.
I would just ask for the public benefit, because I know council got the information about the Airbnb part of the municipal accommodation tax. If you could just speak to what that answer was that was circulated to council.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. So essentially, that amount isn't divided up to the municipalities. So there is an opportunity, Explore Waterloo Region identified that there is an opportunity to collect from Airbnbs, but it at this point isn't broken up specifically to individual municipalities.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I realize that since we've brought up that portion of the topic, I'm obviously in favor of allocating these funds so that the study can be conducted, given that the individual or the business in this case raised these funds. So, but in regards to that communication that came through for the Airbnb, and knowing that we collect on that, I did respond back and essentially, I guess, left hanging to a certain extent. But my suggestion is that Airbnb could almost certainly provide the data as to where those funds were collected, given that their properties are rented by location. So my suggestion would be to the group that is collecting them, which is something Waterloo Region or Explore Waterloo Region. So I would suggest they have a sum of money, whether it be small or large, that we have collected through this initiative. And I, for one, would like to see an accounting of that and hopefully some indication as to what we could use it for. But ultimately, if we're charging a tax for accommodation and Airbnb says that they pay it out, I think we should see where that money is. And there shouldn't be any concern about how that breakdown could be. I mean, you can reconcile it just based on the location of rentals. Anyway, enough said. So I don't know if we need to move for an amendment or suggest just direction, but I would love to see us pursue that further, because there's funds out there that we're not seeing or getting.
So I would say keep it separate from this particular motion, but if staff are willing to take direction for the next time that agreement is open, because right now it's a legal agreement with Explore Waterloo Region and all of the municipalities. I believe it is coming up for review in the next few months. So if we could leave that with staff as a point to continue on with, if that works for council. I'm kind of looking to Councillor Wilkinson if that achieves what you were looking for.
Through the chair, it does. Okay. I mean, I realize that this was a policy that predates this council, but certainly, yes, we'd love to see it. Again, we're collecting taxes and not receiving them.
Yep. And are staff okay to take that as direction when those negotiations reopen?
Through the mayor, I don't think it has anything to do with the negotiations. I think the councillor's question is, taxes are being collected now, and in the past years, where are those monies going? They're going to Explore Waterloo Region. We fund Explore Waterloo Region to the tune of $10,000 a year. We collect municipal accommodation taxes to the tune of about $2,000 a year from hotels and motels.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, it's fair. However, I believe what was before us is suggesting that we collect accommodation taxes and we hold those funds. And those are then being used to basically pursue studies related to tourism and enriching our downtown and potentially bringing in more business and tourists. However, the separate topic was suggested that there is an Airbnb tax collected, but it's collected by Explore Waterloo Region. And if I'm correct, they said in that email that they are unable to account where that money could have possibly come from. My concern is that Airbnb would certainly have a record as to where their locations are and how that income or tax was earned on their behalf. So my suggestion would be, if it's our bylaw and our accommodation tax, we should receive an accounting of that. And I think ultimately, if that's money that we're using to supplement as a grant to Explore Waterloo Region and fund them, we should know what's going in, because my understanding would be that we have a $10,000 line item every year to fund Explore Waterloo Region, but they're also getting additional funds. So I would like those additional funds.
That's easily done. It's in their annual report, and they're having an annual meeting in April. I'd encourage councillors to attend.
Is it possible that report could also be circulated to council just for ease of access to information?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. With that, so we have the motion moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries unanimously. On to our bylaws for this evening. I'd be looking for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor, that carries unanimously. And we do have one notice of motion this evening, so I will turn it over to Councillor Wilkinson to introduce his motion.
Thank you, through the chair. So this was a motion arising out of budget meetings. I had put forward, in essence, a motion that says the council receive quarterly financial variance reports comparing actual year-to-date revenues and expenditures, obviously compared against the adopted budget, and the council use these reports together with long-term financial planning documents to monitor performance against the adopted budget and inform future decision-making. Well, I agree with that. And I do apologize to our clerk, Amelia. One thing I noted that was missing from this is that I was looking for formal motion that essentially said when the future financial reports come out, so the long-term financial plan as well as the 10-year capital plan, in addition to these variance reports, that it would trigger essentially a mini review of the budget at that time. So I was looking to just enhance that by adding those pieces.
I think the clerk is just noting that at the moment. Was there a seconder for this motion? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. While the clerk is getting that exact wording, was there any comments or questions on this motion? Councillor Cressman?
Yes. I'd ask, through you, Mayor, to Director Grable, what is the opportunity to amend a budget after it's passed?
I think the CAO is going to take.
You could amend your budget every single council meeting if you had the courage to.
And through you, Mayor, and drive the finance department to well, I better leave that where it is.
I guess just the other thing I would note, yes, council does always remain the ability to change their budget. I would also note, though, it would be pretty unorthodox, not that we couldn't do it, but it would be pretty unorthodox to remove things from a budget mid-year, because the point of a budget is best educated assumptions and guesses on how you're proceeding. Would just be my only thing to your question, Councillor Cressman. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, perhaps a budget review is the wrong term. I'm not suggesting that we modify and rip apart the budget. However, given that these are informative documents, after this recent budget process, I would suggest that this is probably the best way to at least review and compare, that we are indeed on the right track, or at least have a budget that's informed by them. I realize that they are living documents essentially at this point and will change, but I think it is important that we get those variance reports so that we can measure the performance and see it. But at the same time, when those documents come out, they should be accompanied by the budget and at least almost to a certain extent see an update in them.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Grebo. I was anticipating, and I wasn't expecting this, given my experience on a number of corporate boards, that this is standard procedure, that you get quarterly budget updates. You have variance against what the budget is, and as well you have maybe 2 years of budget information in there, and then you have drop-down menus that you can examine what the detailed analysis of those, where those variances are being generated, as well as take appropriate action if it is needed to control variances that are in excess. I just thought that was standard expectation of this council moving forward. I know we haven't been blessed with that in the past, but I sure hope that as we go forward, that that's what you can deliver on to this council.
Through you, Mayor, yes, it is good governance practice to have regular periodic financial reporting, and you would usually have a variance analysis as part of that.
All right, I'm just going to look to the clerk if we have that updated wording, or sorry, to Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair. Okay, so the revised motion is essentially that council directs staff to present quarterly financial variance reports comparing actual year-to-date revenues and expenditures to the budget, or to the adopted budget, and that council use these reports together with long-term financial planning documents to monitor performance against the adopted budget and inform future decision-making, and that council review the budget at that time. So in essence, that will trigger the review and the information that we're looking for.
Okay. Councillor Cressman.
So through you, Mayor, to Director Graywell, is this redundant because it's our expectation?
Through you, Mayor, to Council. Potentially, yes, but I would say that Council hasn't received that kind of reporting in a while, and so it doesn't hurt to make this motion.
And I was kind of going to say the same thing. In fact, this is not the first time that this council has asked for this type of information, but also appreciate that with our new treasurer, this is something that was made very clear throughout the hiring process and general expectations, as well as already noted, is good governance. But I have no issue with passing. I guess I just want actual clarity so that when, if successful, and passes, when this information comes back, expectations are met. When you say review the budget, and again, I'm not saying I'm against it, I'm just simply asking, are you asking just for the budget to then be attached to this reporting document and leave it up to councillors to pull out items, or are you actually expecting going through things line by line? I just want to know so that expectations are properly met. Councillor Wilkins.
Through the chair, I don't want to say that we're going to go through every item line by line, but I think if there is a proper variance analysis done against the budget, we'll see items highlighted that potentially need to be addressed or not addressed. And the other relationship here is that our long-term financial plan, as well as our 10-year capital plan or any other particular financial documents or strategies that come forward, could be informed by the budget or inform the budget. So I think it's just a matter of having that reporting, that analysis, and knowing it's being done. As much as I enjoy doing it, I don't want everyone to always have to do it. So I think if we have Director Graywell, who's certainly more than capable of doing this, bringing that forward, we'll all be well informed. The public will be appreciative of the transparency, and we'll just help further ensure that we're on the right track. So that's it.
Thank you for that clarity. Any other questions or comments? This has already been moved and seconded. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries unanimously. In terms of announcements, I will keep mine brief to a quick thank you to staff, the Wilmot Heritage Committee, community volunteers, and Councillor Cressman, as well as his wife, for all of their work into a really successful Heritage Day this past Saturday in New Dundee. And thank you to all of the councillors who were also able to make it out, and the general public. I don't have any official numbers yet, but my understanding when I did pop in is that there was a good steady flow of folks coming through, and there was some really engaging both conversations that were being had as well as exhibits that were up. So thank you to everyone who helped make that another successful day. We'll go to Councillor Cressman for announcements.
Yes, I think I would be remiss through you, Mayor, to not thank the two speakers, Kristen Hahn and Al Yunker, for their presentations on commercial fires down through the years in Wilmot.
Very much so. Thank you. Any other announcements, councillors? Okay, seeing none. We already dealt with our business from closed session, so I'd look for a mover and a seconder for our confirmatory bylaw. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And adjournment. Councillor Cressman, Councillor Dunstall almost beat him, but you can second it. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.